I wasn't even supposed to be at my own birthday party yet. But when I stepped back outside early, I froze. My wife was feeding chocolate-covered strawberries to him, her hand lingering on his wrist, laughing like I didn't exist. For 15 years, I'd recorded other people's lies in court. Now I was living one. But they made one fatal mistake. They thought the quiet man would never fight back. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm 37 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years as a court stenographer in the Boston Municipal Court. Every day, I document other people's mistakes, lies, and betrayals. I record the exact moment when the truth finally comes out. Ironic that I missed all the evidence in my own home. It was my birthday, April 14th. Nothing special, just turning 37. Audrey had insisted on throwing a party at our house. Nothing too fancy, she said, just a few friends, some colleagues, good food and wine. She'd spent the whole day decorating the backyard with string lights, setting up the tables, making everything perfect. I remember feeling grateful watching her work so hard for me. The party seemed to be going fine. My boss showed up, a few work friends, Audrey's yoga group, and of course Damien. He was supposedly an old friend from Audrey's college days who had recently moved to Boston. I never liked the guy, but Audrey insisted we invite him. He doesn't know many people here yet, she'd said. It would be cruel to leave him out. I stepped inside to grab my phone when I saw it through the kitchen window. Audrey was standing close to Damien, laughing at something he'd said. Not just any laugh, the kind that makes your eyes crinkle and your head tilt back. The kind she used to reserve for me. Her hand rested on his forearm, lingering there as she leaned in closer. She picked up the chocolate-covered strawberries she'd made specifically for me, because they're your favorite, Marcus, and held one out to him. He took a bite, his eyes never leaving hers. On my birthday, she gave him all her focus, like I wasn't even there. I stood frozen, watching my wife flirt with another man at the party she'd supposedly planned for me. The worst part, no one around them seemed to notice or care. They were all busy with their conversations, their drinks, their lives that weren't crumbling before their eyes. I didn't make a scene. 15 years of sitting silently in courtrooms had taught me how to keep my emotions in check. I grabbed my phone, walked back outside, smiled, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, something had shifted. That night, I began paying attention to what was happening in my own life with the same detail I gave to strangers' testimonies. When we went to bed that night, Audrey kissed my cheek and said, "I hope you had a good birthday." I nodded and turned away, wondering if she'd kissed Damien that day too, but differently. The next morning, the string lights hung limp in the daylight. Empty wine glasses and half-eaten plates of food cluttered the tables. I stood in the yard, barefoot in the morning dew, and knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after my birthday, I woke up before Audrey. The house was silent except for the steady rhythm of the kitchen clock and the occasional car passing on our street. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, staring at the remnants of yesterday's celebration. The string lights now hanging limp, chairs scattered across the lawn, abandoned wine glasses collecting dew. Audrey came downstairs around 9, wearing my old Harvard t-shirt like some claim of territory. She slid her arms around my waist from behind, but I felt myself stiffen at her touch. "Morning, birthday boy," Audrey said, her voice cheerful. Though I guess technically that was yesterday. I didn't turn around. "Yeah." "Everyone loved the party," she continued, reaching past me for a coffee mug. "Your boss wouldn't stop talking about how great it was." I responded, taking another sip. She tilted her head, finally sensing my mood. "Is everything okay?" I put my mug down and turned to face her. "Where did you get those strawberries?" "What?" Audrey's eyebrows furrowed. "The chocolate-covered ones. The ones you were feeding to Damien." Her expression flickered momentarily before smoothing out. "I wasn't feeding them to him." "What are you talking about?" I'd watched enough courtroom testimonies to recognize deflection. "I saw you, Audrey. Through the window." "You're being ridiculous," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I offered everyone food. That's what hosts do." I didn't press further. Instead, I said, "I'm heading to work." "It's Sunday," she reminded me. "The Donovan case goes to trial tomorrow. I need to review some transcripts." It was a lie. There was no Donovan case, but 15 years of recording other people's testimonies had taught me something valuable. Sometimes silence reveals more than questions. At the courthouse, I sat in my empty stenography booth, staring at my machine. The same hands that recorded other people's lies now had to deal with my own truth. I pulled out my phone and checked Audrey's social media accounts, something I'd never bothered to do before. There he was, Damian Taylor, tagged in multiple photos with Audrey over the past 3 months. Yoga retreats, art galleries, wine tastings, events I was too busy to attend or wasn't even told about. In one photo, taken just 2 weeks ago, they stood close together outside a restaurant I didn't recognize. His hand rested casually on her lower back. The caption read, "Friday, unwinding with good company." Friday. When she told me she was having dinner with her sister, I closed the app and sat there, my fingers hovering over the stenography keys. For years, I documented other people's moments of revelation, defendants realizing they'd been caught, witnesses breaking down in tears, attorneys watching their cases crumble. Now I was experiencing my own moment of clarity. I wouldn't confront her yet. I needed more than suspicions and a few photos. I needed evidence that couldn't be explained away, the kind that would hold up in the court of my own conscience. Monday morning, I arrived at the courthouse an hour early. The halls were quiet, just the occasional security guard or early bird attorney passing through. I nodded greetings, but kept to myself. My mind was elsewhere, cycling through the same images. Audrey's hand on Damian's wrist, her laugh, the strawberry. Judge Harmon's courtroom was empty when I entered. I set up my stenograph machine methodically, the same way I had for 15 years. There was comfort in routine, in the unchanging nature of my responsibilities here. Record everything, miss nothing, remain neutral, skills I was now applying to my own life. The day dragged on, a relatively straightforward insurance fraud case. While my fingers recorded testimony automatically, my mind formed a plan. I'd been a passive observer for too long. After work, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the electronics store and purchased a small voice-activated recorder. The sales clerk, a young guy with spiky hair, grinned as he rang me up. Catching someone in the act, "Huh," he asked with a wink. I fixed him with the same neutral stare I'd given hundreds of defendants. "It's for word transcriptions." He backed off immediately. At home, Audrey was already making dinner, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. She barely looked up when I entered. "You're late," she said flatly. I hung on my coat. Trial ran long. "Sorry." The lie came easily, which bothered me more than her coldness. We'd both started building separate narratives. "How was your day?" I asked casually, washing my hands at the kitchen sink. Audrey shrugged. "Fine. Yoga class, then lunch with Paige." Another piece of information to verify. I made a mental note. "You've been spending a lot of time with Paige lately," I remarked. Audrey's knife paused mid-chop. "She's going through a rough patch. Divorce stuff. That must be hard," I said, watching her resume chopping. "Anyone we know?" "No," she answered too quickly. "Just some guy she met through work." During dinner, I kept the conversation light. Work stories and new restaurant downtown, plans for the weekend. All the while, the recorder sat in my pocket, capturing every word, every hesitation. After dinner, Audrey announced she was taking a bath. As soon as I heard the water running, I slipped into her home office and checked her laptop. Password protected. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, her mother's name. Nothing worked. I moved to her desk drawers, searching methodically. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of magazines, I found a hotel receipt from the Harborview and dated 3 weeks ago, when Audrey was supposedly at a yoga retreat with Paige. I photographed it with my phone, then replaced everything exactly as I found it. Years of watching crime scenes being processed had taught me to leave no trace. Back in the living room, I heard Audrey's phone chime with a text message. It sat on the coffee table, screen up. A notification appeared. "Damian, can't wait for tomorrow. Same place." I picked up a book and pretended to read, my heart pounding in my chest. Tomorrow. I needed to know where same place was. Wednesday arrived, and I was ready. I'd called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. Judge Harmon's clerk had sounded surprised, but arrangements were made for a substitute stenographer. Today wasn't about other people's truths. It was about uncovering my own. Audrey left for her yoga class at 9, dressed more carefully than stretchy pants and downward dog would require. I waited 20 minutes, then followed her in my neighbor's car, a favor I'd arranged the night before with a story about surprising her for our anniversary. She drove not to the yoga studio, but to a cafe downtown. Through the window, I watched as she met Paige. At least that part wasn't a lie. They talked intensely for half an hour, Audrey gesturing emphatically, Paige nodding with an expression of concern. When Damien arrived, Paige left with a quick hug for Audrey and a friendly pat on Damien's shoulder. Complicit. The two watched her go, then turned to each other with matching smiles that made my stomach clench. I took photos with my phone, careful to remain unnoticed. After coffee, they walked to Damien's car. I followed them to the Harborview Inn, the same hotel from the receipt I'd found. They checked in with practiced ease, familiar with the routine. I noted the room number from my position across the lobby, pretending to read a newspaper. Back home, I accessed Audrey's laptop. The password had come to me during a sleepless night. Strawberry 22, the name of her first cat, plus the date they'd adopted it. Inside, I found what I needed. Email exchanges with Damien going back 5 months, hotel confirmations, photos I wished I could unsee. I copied everything to a flash drive, careful to leave no digital footprints, then cleared the browser history as I found it. At 2:30, Audrey returned home, flushed and smiling. She jumped slightly when she saw me in the living room. "Marcus, you're home early," she said, her hand flying to her throat. I kept my voice neutral. Wasn't feeling well. "How was yoga?" "Great," she replied too quickly. "Very invigorating." "And lunch with Paige after?" I asked innocently. She nodded, heading toward the stairs. "Yes, just a quick bite. I'm going to shower before dinner." While the shower ran, I retrieved the voice recorder I'd hidden under the bed that morning and played back what it had captured during my absence. First, silence. Then the sound of the front door opening. 2 voices. Audrey and Damien. "He suspects something," Audrey's voice said. "He's been asking weird questions." "What's he going to do?" Damien sounded amused rather than concerned. "The guy records other people's drama for a living. He's not exactly confrontational." "You don't know him like I do," Audrey replied. "He's quiet, but he notices everything." "So what if he does find out?" Damien's voice again, unconcerned. "For what you've told me, he'll probably just sit there and take notes." Their laughter, then sounds I didn't need to hear. I stopped the recording, a cold clarity washing over me. I'd heard witnesses break down when confronted with irrefutable evidence. Now I understood that feeling from the inside. But unlike them, I wouldn't lose control. I'd make my case methodically, present my evidence, and render judgment. The shower stopped. I had everything I needed now. Thursday evening, Audrey and I sat across from each other at dinner, the air between us thick with unspoken accusations. She kept glancing at her phone, which chimed with texts she was careful not to answer while I was watching. "We should go away this weekend," I said casually, cutting into my steak. "Maybe that bed and breakfast in Vermont we visited last year." Audrey's fork paused midway to her mouth. "This weekend? I can't. I have plans with Paige." "Another yoga retreat?" I asked, maintaining eye contact. She set her fork down. "Why do you say it like that?" "Like what?" "Like you don't believe me," she said, defensive edge in her voice. I took a sip of water. "I believe you have plans. I'm just not sure they involve yoga. Or Paige." Her cheeks flushed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Her voice filled the dining room. "He suspects something. He's been asking weird questions." Then Damien's voice. "What's he going to do?" "The guy records other people's drama for a living. He's not exactly confrontational." Their laughter. I stopped the recording before it reached the sounds I couldn't bear to hear again. Audrey's face had gone pale. "You've been spying on me." "I've been collecting evidence." I corrected her. "There's a difference." "Evidence of what?" Her voice rose, a desperate attempt at indignation. "You know exactly what." My voice remained steady. "The Harborview Inn, room 312. 3 weeks ago, when you were supposedly at a yoga retreat." She stood up suddenly, knocking her wine glass over. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. "This is crazy. You're invading my privacy. And you're invading our marriage," I replied, still seated. "With Damien." Her denial crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's not what you think. It just happened. I never meant. Never meant for me to find out." I finished for her. "That much is clear." Audrey collapsed back in her chair. "What are you going to do?" I leaned forward. "I'm not going to throw a tantrum, if that's what you're expecting." I'm not going to beg you to choose me either. Then what? She whispered. Nothing. For now. I stood up, gathering the plates. I have a dinner reservation for tomorrow night. A nice place downtown. I'd like you to join me. Confusion crossed her face. You want to go on a date? After this? Not exactly, I replied. But I think you should be there for what I have planned. I left her sitting at the table, wine still seeping into the tablecloth. In the kitchen, I methodically washed the dishes, my mind focused on tomorrow's arrangements. Everything was in place. The private dining room booked, the flash drive with copies of all the evidence, the envelope for Paige. That night, I slept in the guest room, door locked. I could hear Audrey crying in our bedroom, her voice muffled through the wall. Once, I might have gone to comfort her. Now, I simply turned over and continued planning my next moves. Friday evening arrived with a steady rain that matched my mood, cold, relentless, cleansing. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy one I'd worn to court during the Henderson trial where the defendant had broken down and confessed on the stand. It felt appropriate. Audrey emerged from our bedroom, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. Her eyes were puffy from crying. Is this really necessary? She asked, fidgeting with her purse strap. Yes, I replied simply, holding the front door open for her. The restaurant was upscale, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, soft jazz playing in the background. I'd requested a private dining room in the back, away from other patrons. The host led us there with practiced discretion. Will your other guests be arriving soon, Mr. Reed? He asked. Yes, I answered. 3 more. Audrey looked at me sharply. 3? Who else is coming? Before I could answer, the door opened again. Paige walked in, her usual confidence visibly shaken when she saw me. Behind her was Damien, looking annoyed rather than concerned. What is this? He demanded, glancing between Audrey and me. I gestured to the table. Please sit down. We're waiting on one more person. Marcus, what are you doing? Audrey whispered urgently. I ignored her, watching the door. Right on cue, a distinguished older man entered. Richard Taylor, Damien's boss at the architectural firm where he worked. I'd found him through a simple LinkedIn search. Mr. Taylor, thank you for joining us, I said, standing to shake his hand. I appreciate you making time on short notice. Mr. Reed. He nodded formally, then turned to Damien with raised eyebrows. Damien, I didn't realize you'd be here. Damien had gone pale. Richard, I can explain. I raised my hand. Before anyone explains anything, let's order some wine. The next 15 minutes passed in excruciating silence as drinks were served and menus presented. I ordered calmly while the others barely glanced at the offerings. When the waiter finally left, I pulled out a flash drive and placed it on the table. This contains everything, I said matter-of-factly. Recordings, photographs, hotel receipts, emails. Evidence of a 5-month affair between my wife and your employee, Mr. Taylor. Richard's expression hardened. Is this true, Damien? This is ridiculous, Damien sputtered, looking to Audrey for support. Tell them this is crazy. Audrey stared at her hands, silent tears falling. I continued, my voice steady. I'm not interested in drama. I'm interested in consequences. What do you want? Paige finally spoke, her voice small. Why am I here? You're here because you facilitated this, I answered, turning to her. You provided alibis, created cover stories. You weren't just aware. You were complicit. I was being a friend, she protested. You were being a conspirator, I corrected her. And your husband will receive his own copy of this flash drive tomorrow, unless you all listen carefully to what I have to say next. The table fell silent. For pairs of eyes fixed on me. Audrey's fearful, Damien's angry, Paige's guilty, Richard's calculating. I'd spent years recording others' most critical moments. Now I was creating one of my own. The silence in the private dining room stretched until our waiter returned with wine. I dismissed him with a nod, then faced the 4 people whose world I was about to upend. I'm not here to create a scene. I began, my voice controlled and even. I'm here to outline consequences. Damien leaned forward, attempting bravado. Look, Marcus, this doesn't have to be. I'm not finished. I cut him off with the same authority I'd seen judges use to silence unruly attorneys. Mr. Taylor, your firm has a morality clause in its partnership track. Damien is 6 months from being considered for partner. These documents show he's been conducting his affair partially during business hours, using company resources. Richard's face darkened. Is this true? Damien's mouth opened and closed without sound. I don't want his job, I continued, but I want him transferred to your Seattle office. Immediately. That's 3,000 miles away. Audrey protested, finding her voice. I turned to her, my expression unchanged. Yes, it is. Richard nodded slowly. That could be arranged. This is blackmail, Damien sputtered. No, I replied calmly. It's consequences. The alternative is I send this evidence to your board of directors and the press. Your choice. Damien glared but remained silent. I turned a page. You've been covering for them, lying to me and your husband for months. I was just helping a friend, she whispered. Then help her now, I said, sliding an envelope toward her. This contains information about a divorce attorney. Audrey will need one. Audrey's head snapped up. Marcus, please. I'm filing Monday morning. I continued as if she hadn't spoken. The terms are fair. You get the house, I keep my retirement accounts. We sell the vacation property and split the proceeds. Tears streamed down Audrey's face. Can we at least talk about this? We are talking, I replied. Right now, in front of witnesses who know exactly what you've done. I stood, buttoning my suit jacket. Mr. Taylor, I expect confirmation of Damien's transfer by Monday. Paige, I expect you'll stop facilitating infidelity, starting with your own husband. Audrey, I'll be staying at a hotel until the paperwork is filed. And what about me? Damien asked bitterly. I looked at him for a long moment. You can have the strawberries. With that, I placed my napkin on the table and walked out, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air felt clean for the first time in months. In my car, I took a deep breath, then another. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. Instead, I felt something unexpected, relief. For 15 years, I'd recorded other people's truths without speaking my own. Tonight, that had changed. The weekend passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I checked into the Parkside Hotel, a deliberate choice, different from the Harbor View where Audrey had met Damien. Saturday morning, I hired movers to collect my essential belongings from the house. By afternoon, I'd secured a month-to-month apartment rental in the city center, closer to the courthouse. Audrey called 17 times. I let each go to voicemail. Her messages evolved from tearful pleas to angry accusations, and finally, to resigned acceptance. The last one, left Sunday evening, was simple. I'll sign whatever you want. I'm sorry. Monday morning, I filed the divorce papers as promised. My attorney, Barbara Whitman, had been prepared for weeks. I contacted her after finding the first hotel receipt, just in case. This is thorough, she commented, reviewing the documents. Most clients can't separate emotion from legality so cleanly. I've spent my career documenting people's worst moments, I replied. I've learned a few things about human nature. After signing the paperwork, I walked to the courthouse for my regular shift. Judge Harmon was presiding over a custody battle. Fitting, somehow. I set up my stenography machine with practiced efficiency and began recording another family's disintegration. During the lunch recess, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard Taylor. Transfer paperwork processed. Damien leaves for Seattle next Monday. I nodded to myself, slipping the phone back into my pocket. One promise fulfilled. When I returned to my apartment that evening, a package waited at the front desk. Inside was my old Harvard t-shirt, the one Audrey had worn the morning after my birthday, washed, folded, and smelling faintly of her perfume. Beneath it lay a handwritten note. You spent years recording other people's truths while I built our life on lies. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I understand what I've lost. I placed the shirt in a donation box in the lobby, but kept the note, tucking it into the back of my wallet. Not as a reminder of her, but of myself, of the man who finally spoke his own truth instead of merely recording others. That night, I sat on my new balcony, overlooking the city lights. For the first time in months, I breathed freely. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something cleaner, sharper, more defined. Like the precise record of testimony I created every day, the truth of my situation was finally clear on the page. I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been contemplating for days. Courthouse administration, a woman's voice answered. "This is Marcus Reed," I said. "I'd like to apply for the court reporter position in the federal district. I understand there's an opening." It was time for a new chapter, one where I would no longer be silent. 6 weeks after filing for divorce, I settled into my new routine. The federal court position had come through. Higher pay, more prestigious cases, and a fresh start. My apartment was sparse but functional, decorated with a few items I'd chosen to keep from my previous life. The divorce proceedings were moving smoothly until my attorney called on a Wednesday afternoon. "Marcus, we have a situation," Barbara said, her voice tense. "Damien's filed a harassment claim against you." I paused in the middle of preparing dinner. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming you coerced his transfer to Seattle through blackmail, and that it's caused him professional and emotional distress." I set down my knife. "I have recordings of everything that was said that night." "That's part of the problem," Barbara continued. "Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings. If you didn't have his permission—" "I understand," I interrupted. "What does he want?" $100,000 in damages and for you to retract any statements made to his employer." I almost laughed. "And if I don't?" "He'll sue and potentially file criminal charges for the recordings." After hanging up, I stood at my kitchen counter, weighing my options. Damien was gambling that I'd pay to avoid prolonging the public spectacle of my failed marriage. He'd misunderstood me completely. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse early. Instead of heading to my assigned courtroom, I walked to Judge Harmon's chambers and requested a brief meeting. "Marcus," the judge greeted me, genuine surprise on his face. "What brings you here?" "I need your advice, Your Honor, not as a judge, but as someone who's observed human nature as long as I have." He gestured to a chair. "Go on." I laid out the situation, the affair, Damien's threat, my options. Judge Harmon listened without interruption, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "What would you do?" I asked finally. He smiled faintly. "In my 40 years on the bench, I've learned that bullies back down when challenged directly. This man expects you to fold." "I don't intend to," I replied. "Good." Judge Harmon nodded. "But there's something else you should know. Patricia in records tells me your wife came in last week requesting transcripts from a Millington case." My brows furrowed. "The workplace retaliation suit." "The very one," he confirmed, "where the plaintiff was awarded triple damages for the defendant's pattern of retaliatory behavior." I understood immediately. Audrey wasn't just accepting the divorce. She was preparing to help me fight back. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Damien did the same thing at his last firm. "I have proof. Meet tomorrow." Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Audrey had been wrong about many things, but she'd been right about one. I noticed everything, and now, finally, I was ready to speak up. 1 year later, I stood in a different courtroom, this time as an observer rather than a court reporter. Damien's harassment lawsuit had backfired spectacularly. Thanks to evidence Audrey had gathered from his previous workplace, along with testimony from 3 other women he'd harassed, he now faced his own legal troubles. As the judge delivered the ruling against him, I felt no satisfaction, only closure. Audrey sat 2 rows ahead, her posture straight, her testimony having been crucial to the case. When court adjourned, she approached me in the hallway. "Congratulations," she said simply. "Thank you for your help," I replied. Our interactions had become civil, professional, the passionate history between us replaced by something more subdued but honest. "I had my own reasons," she admitted. "He threatened me too, after you exposed everything." We walked together toward the courthouse steps. Our divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, but this was the first time we'd spoken about anything beyond necessary paperwork. "How's the federal position?" she asked. "Challenging," I answered. "I'm recording cases that actually matter." She nodded, understanding the subtle dig at our past. "I'm moving to Chicago next month. Fresh start." "Good luck," I said, and meant it. Outside, the spring air was crisp and clean. As we prepared to go our separate ways, Audrey hesitated. "Marcus, I wanted to ask, how did you know? When did you first suspect?" I considered the question. "It was my birthday," I finally said. "When you gave him all your focus, like I wasn't even there. But when I walked out and you didn't even notice my absence, that's when I knew for certain." Pain flickered across her face. "I was a fool. We both were," I conceded. "Me for not speaking up sooner. You for thinking I never would." We shook hands like the strangers we'd become and parted ways. I watched her walk to her car, remembering the woman I'd married and accepting that she was gone. That evening, I received a call from Judge Harmon. He was retiring and had recommended me for a supervisory position overseeing the federal court reporting department. They need someone who understands the value of accurate records, he said. Someone who notices everything and isn't afraid to speak up when necessary. After accepting his recommendation, I walked to my balcony and gazed at the city lights. The past year had transformed me from a passive recorder of other people's truths to an active participant in my own story. At my desk lay an invitation to my brother's wedding next month. The response card had a +1 option. For the first time since the divorce, I was considering taking someone, a fellow court reporter I'd been having coffee with recently. Nothing serious yet, just conversations where we both actually listened. I checked through attending with guest box. It was time to start a new chapter, one where I would never again be silent about what mattered.